have now raised the money to do it,
Great.
Was a temple where people were initiated into the mysteries of death. Now, in the ancient classical mysteries and the ancient Egyptian mysteries, initiation was an initiation into the other world, the world of the dead. And it was considered that it was a good idea to have a look at the place you were going when you died before you died. But the thing was, when you were initiated into the secrets of this other world, you weren't allowed to talk about it. And so very, very little is known about the procedures and so on of these mystery traditions. There's very little that survived, and what little has survived, I've put in my book, The Jesus Papers. But what's clear is this initiatory quality. Now, the thing is, we're up against a lot of prejudice. A fellow I know who's probably the biggest European expert on the Mithras cult, and he took my wife and I one day down to an underground Mithras temple, which is not open to the public at all. And at the end of the temple was this incredible painting of Mithras fighting the bull in beautiful colors. It's in perfect condition. Well, it was when it was first discovered. But now the eyes of Mithras have been gouged out and mutilated. And as this particular archaeologist told me, that mutilation has been done by an archaeologist who found Mithras too challenging to his faith. So even today, amongst educated archaeologists, these things are incredibly sensitive and incredibly powerful. Sometimes the emotions simply get the better of them.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I just did an interview with Michael Cremo on his book, The Forbidden Archaeologist, about archaeological finds, which are millions of years old, are not allowed to go public at all and squashed so that that information never gets to the public how old the human race really is. It was fascinating. Fascinating.
And Michael Cremo is doing us all a big favor. I've only met him the once, but I liked him, and what he's doing is fantastic.
Fascinating, fascinating man. And I think you're also doing us all a favor, but a lot of us will resent you. The problem you have is that you're not just doing it on archaeology. You are putting the pieces together of things that don't make sense in the way the Bible communicates itself as a form of history rather than as allegory, correct?
Yeah. Look, I mean, the bottom line is I just do what I can do. I'm not really on a crusade or anything like this. It's just what I do. And it just happens that I had some questions, I sought the answers, and the road by which I traveled to try and figure these answers out, I've written about. That's the simple fact of it. I'm not sort of filled with hate or anger or, I'm not trying to destroy things. I'm just trying to understand what really is going on and to get behind the spin. I mean, we all know about political spin, but a lot of us have forgotten that there's a lot of religious spin as well.
What do you think happened in Italy such that you went into the caves in the northwest corner of the Bay of Naples? What do you think happened? What was your take after you left? Like, what were you left with going into the caves there?
Utter excitement. I mean, you see, this underground temple, it's down a 600-foot tunnel into a cliff.
You were pretty brave to go through there. I read the details of that. It was pretty scary just reading it.
I love tunnels. I spend a lot of time in tunnels because that's where there's a lot of hidden things. The Romans were so scared of this place that they filled it with rubble. And my feeling is that the temple down there, 600 feet down this narrow tunnel, which runs due east-west, by the way, I think they would have left everything in the temple, because if they were that scared of the place, they wouldn't have pulled anything out, because they would have been too superstitious to take anything out in case the spirits followed them or something like this. Who knows? But I think there's precedence in the Mediterranean. I know in Mallorca they did this kind of thing. They used to smash the things up and then cover them. And I think that's what they've probably done in this temple. I think they've smashed everything up and just filled tunnels with rubble as they came out. But of course the rubble is now settled, and there's now about an 18-inch gap between the top of the rubble and the top of the tunnel. I mean, over 2,000 years or so, it's just settled that much. So what I'm hoping is that in that temple there, we'll find a whole lot of material which will allow us to read the site. Because there's an underground river there too, which is very unusual, and a whole complex of tunnels. I think we only found a small part of them.
How did you not get lost? I mean, I was getting lost reading about you in there, going through to the left, to the right, and
Well, I sort of did get lost a few times. Quite confusing down there. There's a tunnel, you go to the end of it, and when you get to the end of it, you hope you can turn around and come back. The main thing I was worried about is that I wouldn't be able to turn around at the end, and I'd have to sort of end up crawling backwards down a tunnel, which is not as easy as crawling forward.
That's scary just listening to it. God. I bet your wife didn't appreciate you going down in there, that not knowing if you would come out.
She didn't know.
Oh, my God. That's a good thing. Wow. I'll bet she wouldn't have let you go.
Well, she was outside. She didn't know what I was doing down there.
Oh, my God.
I actually got her down there.
You even had the other people with you scared to death.
Well, that's true. I ran out of rope, so I just untied it and let it go and kept going.
Oh, my God. That's wild.
I mean, what can they do? How can you pull someone out with a rope anyway?
That's
ridiculous.
True. That's true. I guess it's a way to just know where you are.
Well, to know I'm still there, yeah, I suppose.
Talk to us about the Dead Sea Scrolls. So many people are interested in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I haven't read your other book, The Dead Sea Scroll Deception. What are you saying?
Well, that came out quite some time ago, and there's been a lot of changes in the Dead Sea Scrolls since that time. I mean, they've now been made available to everyone, but at the time I wrote the book, they weren't available. And we were arguing that they should be available because by restricting access to them, they were perpetrating a spin on the material. I mean, as I'm constantly going on about, I dislike the spin that's put on religious systems. And the Dead Sea Scrolls was one very obvious one. It was in the hands of people who controlled the area, they controlled physically the scrolls, they controlled the interpretation of them, they controlled what scrolls people could know about. And we discovered that one of the scrolls talked about someone called the Son of God. Now, if that's not a parallel with Christianity, I don't know what is. But they didn't release that scroll for something like 45 years. And you have to ask yourself, why didn't they release it for 45 years? I talked to a Jesuit who was in Jerusalem at the museum where the scrolls were held on the day that that particular fragment came in, which had talked about the Son of God. And I said to him, well, I suppose it took you quite a long time to translate it. He said, no, he said, we had it more or less translated by the next morning. So 1958, and when was it released? Well, sometime in the 1990s. Now, you tell me, I mean, is that a mark of true scholarship or a reluctance to let something out?
Deathly fear of some other interpretation coming.
That's what the Dead Sea Scrolls deception is about. The deception, probably not the best word we could have chosen, but these days we'd use the word spin. But of course, back in the early 90s, spin wasn't really a term that anyone understood. So deception was the word we went with.
So what do the Dead Sea Scrolls, let's say at Cove 7 in Qumran, you said they're written in Greek on papyrus, and the other caves were written in Hebrew and Aramaic on parchment.
Most of the scrolls are in Aramaic or Hebrew. Well, most of them are in Hebrew, to be honest, some in Aramaic. But what's very interesting is that the scrolls from, I think it's Cave 7, all of them were in Greek. Now, what that